Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. Football season is here. It's a Sunday, which means we're back with Kevin Flaherty for our weekly podcast discussing Kansas football. We actually have football to talk about, Kevin, and
Yes.
there's plenty to break down from this one. Obviously, before we get started, make sure you're following Kevin on Twitter, tracking all the work he does for KC Sports Network, does plenty of podcasts over there. So if you're looking to get more of a podcast fix of local recruiting stuff, he does a great job with the Verbal Commitment podcast. You can look at the Pay Heed podcast if you're looking for more Kansas specific stuff. So just again, make sure you're checking out all the work Kevin's putting in with KC Sports Network. But Kevin, man, we were texting about it last night. This is like the perfect season opener because there's just enough interesting stuff to talk about, but not super newsworthy. And then it was just boring enough in the second half where you can kind of there's not too much to talk about. There's still plenty of questions, I think, still that can be answered. Maybe not next week, but in a couple of weeks. And before we get started, Kevin, I want to get your take on this. Do you think Matt Entz and Lance Leipold met under the scoreboard at halftime to decide that nothing should happen in the second half and that they should just run out the clock? Because I got some serious, all right, this game's over. Let's go home vibes from the second half.
It very much felt like Lindenwood a year ago, right? Where, KU got up on Lindenwood and then in the second half basically, spent the half tying its shoes and, looking around at the atmosphere and everything as the clock ticks down. And so, yeah, it definitely seemed like one where Kansas wasn't going to take like deep shots or continue to do things like that. And to be fair, I did think the offensive line played well in the second half in terms of, Kansas sort of started just lining up and running the ball, and they were able to do that, pretty effectively, I think, in the second half. But overall, yeah, you're absolutely right. Way more action in the first half. The second half was kind of like, well, we got a tea time to hit if the game were played earlier.
I can relate to that feeling, Kevin. I can
Yeah.
relate to that feeling. All right. Well, let's take a step back then. Let's go back to the beginning of the day. Obviously, KU opens up the end of kind of phase one of the Gateway District. The convention center's coming. It's going to be open in October. But broadly, right, the stadium was unveiled for the first time. And, we've been able to go through and do tours and stuff like that. But I think getting to see people inside the stadium, in the stands, man, I thought it was really cool. And going around campus too, uh, plenty of buzz going into the game. And I think you could really feel the excitement to be, for KU fans to be back in Lawrence for a home football game, right? It's so different last year when you pull up to Arrowhead and it's just a big parking lot, right? And it's like a very traditional, like NFL style pregame where people are tailgating the parking lot. It's great, but having, I think, a lot of the stuff around campus, seeing people walk around and all that, I think it just adds another dimension to some of the buzz you feel. And then obviously pregame, Kevin, the students getting in there so fast. The stadium really filled up super quickly. I think as
Yeah.
fast as I can remember it in a very long time. And I think it just created a super, I think, probably special is the right word, atmosphere for KU to start the game because it's a once in a generation type of thing, right? You don't open up a new stadium every year, every 5 years, every 10
Yeah.
years, right? This is something that is huge for Kansas. And I thought it was really cool to see everyone kind of buy in. And I think, you get really cool photos like this with the stripe out and just everything top to bottom, I think was super cool. So what was your perspective on seeing it? Because I thought the stripe out looked great. I thought the atmosphere itself was really great. It really did seem like a smooth day. And look, I'm sure there are kinks and things that KU is going to have to work out. But I think just top to bottom, if you look at it, I thought it looked like they looked great. The atmosphere was good. And I think that's what you can ask for.
I expected more kinks, honestly. Just anytime you open something new like this, a lot of times it takes longer to get people in, or,
Mm,
people are trying to figure things out. And so you have, clogs where people can't get where they want to go, or different things. And you sort of figure it out from that point. Most of the fans that I talked to, just sort of raved about the experience.
mm.
There were, a few complaints. Somebody complained that there weren't enough beer options. The little stuff like that that I don't think is necessarily like, oh, I'm not going back to a KU football game because of this. But the other thing, and obviously we took the tour this week with Jason Booker and Travis Goff, and one of the things that Booker had tried to say was kind of there's a seat for everybody, and I think you can kind of see that a little bit, and that you saw, the people who were down like in the little like club area in the end zone was maybe a different fan than you were seeing, at the 50-yard line, was different fan than you were seeing up in the upper deck. And so it was one of those things where I do think that fans are going to be able to kind of get in where they fit in, I guess, a little bit in
Mm.
terms of that experience. And so I thought it was pretty cool. Also, a note from our new spot in the press box over in the corner versus being up, as high as we were before, you really got a better feel for the atmosphere where we were at. I think there was a point in the third quarter, maybe the fourth, where you could actually hear one of the vendors yelling out like "last call for alcohol" type of deal, which we would not have gotten it in our previous seats. I can tell you that much.
No, and I thought it was an interesting part of the tour that, when Travis Goff talked about the height of the old stadium, and obviously we know about how pushed back it was, but if you go to, I think it was the top row of the top deck, that's where the old press box, and that's where a lot of the old suites were.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then you look at it and just how different it is, where you're right, like, the press box level is on the same level as, I believe it's the Limestone Club,
Yep.
which is the upper level of the suites. And, the Kansas Athletics like where the basketball team, or I guess coaches, really not the team. The team was in the student section, which I thought was cool in of itself.
Yeah.
You can kind of like see into that, and everything is so much more on top of it. And I think we've talked plenty about that with the sight lines and things like that. But again, seeing it, I think getting a feel for it down on the field as well. Pregame, I'm going down to shoot recruit photos and stuff, and you just look around and you do get to feel the sense of how on top of you it is, and it feels even more so when there are fans. So that's something I'm sure at some point this year there'll be a game that requires me to be down on the field with 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and we'll really get a feel for the atmosphere and what it's like truly when you're on the field. But yeah, I thought overall it really did seem like a perfect day. It was hot, not as hot as it's been around here.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, this next week, Friday night's gonna be pretty nice. It should be, I think, what, high 70s. Like, it's
Yeah.
gonna be perfect weather there. But I just think, Kevin, everything looked really cool. It was really interesting to hear some of the players talk about it post game, how Lance Leipold made the comment, KU has a real tunnel now, so it feels like a Power 4 football program. Just stuff like that. And so then you get into the game, Kevin, and it just, the vibes. I think yesterday was very much just a vibes day, and the offense comes out and they move the ball. It looks like the KU offense that I think everyone was expecting, right? Motion, misdirection, not necessarily just line up. We're going to run it right through this gap, like maybe you saw sometimes last year, and that worked,
Yeah.
right? Devin Neal had over 1,000 yards rushing last year. It worked, but other parts of the offense weren't up to snuff. And I think you can look at the first drive and how things went, and broadly Jalen Daniels and the way he played. Like, you just got to feel good about the offense coming out of that first drive, and really I think just totally the game overall. But what were the things that caught your attention maybe in the first couple drives offensively? Because I do think in the second half, KU got away from doing some of the creative stuff. It became a little bit more vanilla, one-dimensional, as you'd expect. But when the game was in the balance, Kevin, what stood out to you about the offense?
Yeah, I think the creativity was really high. We had talked previously about how the bringing Matt Lubick back was going to be big for the creativity with the run game and the option and the things like that he kind of specializes in. And I liked a lot of the pass looks off
Mm.
of sort of that option game, the way that you kind of got everybody flowing to one side, and then Jalen would have sort of like a little half boot away from the option, and he'd had a couple options there. The creativity was great, and I thought Jalen looked totally in control sort of throughout the first half. There was a point there where he got hit a little bit. One of the things that Nick Benedetto, the defensive coordinator for Fresno State, really excelled at Northern Illinois was, putting a whole bunch of guys up on the line of scrimmage, and then you don't really know which guys are coming.
Mm.
And so it puts a lot of stress and strain on your offensive line to go against that, because he's sending extra guys. You just don't know which extra guys are coming. And there were a few plays there where I think there was a stretch of about 3 plays where it felt like Jalen kind of ate hard contact all right in a row, and everybody's kind of like, oh, don't love that necessarily. But overall, I thought the offense looked really good, was really creatively called, and Jalen looked about I want to say about as well put together as a total performance as maybe we've seen since Illinois 23, maybe, in terms of like the fluidity that he's playing with, the way that he was making guys miss. And I really realized he had some good moments a year ago, but like just sort of the way that he was so in control reminded me of that Illinois game.
Yeah, I think my mind always goes back to the Iowa State game last year, which was
Yep.
just and granted, some of that was just because the game was a bomb fest. It was
Yes.
just a deep shot after deep shot. But I think you're right. Like Jalen looked in control, and that's what you wanted to see. Because at least I think back to last year in the Lindenwood game and the mistake that Jalen makes on the miscommunication with Luke Grimm, I believe it was,
Yep.
where he throws the interception. And that was you didn't know it at the time, right? It was easier to brush that aside and say, oh, first game jitters, first game, whatever. Well, it turns out that was kind of a sign of things to come. And I
Yep.
think for KU in this game, the fact that there wasn't that moment of like uh-oh, like Jalen's lost control here, or things are on the ropes. Like even after he took a couple of those hits, nothing changed.
Yep.
He still made really good decisions. I don't recall a single time that even on a reception where the ball was put in jeopardy. And granted, some of that's also scheme related, Kevin. I was
Sure.
looking this morning, KU used the middle of the field again. It's
I
pretty interesting.
we just like peek behind the curtain or whatever. We're at the game, on Saturday night, and then usually I'll get up on Sunday morning. I'll rewatch the game, and I'll think like, okay, what's Swain going to want to talk about? Like what is something that's in his wheelhouse? And so the first thing that I noticed, like going back, was like, apparently they're allowed to use the middle of the field again. Swain is going to absolutely bring this up.
And who would have thought Jalen Daniels completes 18 of 20 passes, right? An incredibly efficient performance. I should have looked ahead of time to see the last time he had this smooth of a game, but it's just incredible. Like, okay, and here's a good example. You can look at like the Keaton Quebec touchdown. That's a really creative route that Keaton runs, where it's like it looks like a little slant stop, and then he gets back in the middle of the field again. Like that's a perfect route to really attack the space that's in the heart of the defense. Or you can look at some of the times that Jalen had to scramble, and it's a Cam Pickett that's getting over the middle and getting open. Like it was not a game where Jalen's having to make throws outside the numbers, where it's all about having precise timing. You have to have a perfect throw. There's a little bit more room for error when everything's in front of you and you've got space to work with. And so, I thought that was really interesting to see KU attack in those ways. Obviously, motion. KU motioned plenty last year, but I think there are also different types of, a little bit more orbit motion, or some of the stuff on the you had the jet toss or whatever to Emmanuel Henderson in the first half. Like KU also used some of that motion, where it wasn't just pre-snap motion that doesn't lead to anything, or it's a guy moving to the other side. It was motion that then led into the play itself, that then forces people to think the next time you do have any sort of motion, okay, is the ball being snapped right now?
Yep.
And so I thought the creativity wise, there's different levels to it. And I think that you saw a little bit more of nuanced creativity, where it's not just, oh, we're motioning a guy to move him over to a different spot to help identify a look. It was a motion to get a guy moving so that when the ball is snapped, right, he's in a good position. So I thought offensively for KU, it was really good in the first half. Good to see Daniel Highshaw get some carries, look physical. LeSean Williams, Kevin, we talked about it before.
Yeah.
300 carries at Iowa. 1 in every 300 was a touchdown. He could have walked off the field the champion. 1 carry, 1 touchdown at Kansas, and it would have been an iconic performance for him. But I think running back wise, you feel pretty good.
How
Huh?
much you love that play call, by the way. 4th and 1 in that situation. You didn't run sugar huddle in that situation. You lined up, you ran pin and pull, just straight up said, "Hey, you're not going to stop us," and it broke open.
It was good, and Carson Brune had a really good block on that play
Yeah.
as well. He's someone that played a lot as a redshirt freshman in the season opener. So I loved it, and Leipold going for it in that instance, I think it's great. There's a good stat out there. I'll be writing about it at some point. But basically, last year KU ranked 8th, I believe it was, in the FBS in total win probability gained from going forward on 4th down. Not that KU did it a lot, right? They weren't Texas Tech in terms of the frequency, but when they did it, they were situations where it really impacted KU's win probability. I don't know what the numbers would have been for that play for Leishon, but you look at the situation, and it really does help put KU in the driver's seat as the defense started to settle down, and KU can really go on from there. So yeah, I think top to bottom, it looked good. Let's talk wide receiver though, Kevin,
Yeah.
because if you've been on the message board, I've been pumping up Cam Pickett, and everyone knows about Emmanuel Henderson, but like those two guys to me, Kevin, they look like the best 2 wide receivers KU has. I thought they showed what you want to see from them in a game like this.
Yeah, and some of it again comes down to utilization too. I mean, you get Cam Pickett getting multiple catches lined up as a running back, basically, and then running sort of RPO stuff off of that. But I got to give you kudos where it's due, Swain. I do feel like you were the first media member to sort of come out on the Cam Pickett train. Like I do think that you were way out in front of that one, and it was kind of funny because talking before the game with people, you're trying to figure out all these little prop bets and things like that, and and it was a pretty popular conversation topic that, hey, Cam Pickett anytime touchdown is probably a pretty solid bet because Fresno State had really good sort of outside corners who were probably Big 12 level guys on the outside. But what do you do with the slot guy like Cam Pickett, who's going to catch the ball in different spaces and doesn't have to work against those guys? And so Cam Pickett is a guy that I think it's good for him that he came to Kansas and that I think he's going to be utilized in ways that really play to his strengths. But the flip side of that is Kansas really needed a guy like that is going to do that. It also is one of those reasons I'm kind of a little bit excited for some of the younger guys in KU's receiver room because I think that they kind of checked some of those same boxes. But no, you're absolutely right. The other thing the receivers did really well, Swain, and I'll throw Levi Wentz in here on this. I thought he blocked really well.
Totally.
I thought the receivers and tight ends were all pretty outstanding from a blocking standpoint. And I know we'll get to the offensive line, but offensive line was a little bit more hit and miss with that stuff. But I thought when you're talking about the other guys laying blocks, whether it was the receivers or the tight ends, I thought KU got a lot from those guys.
Yeah, like the first touchdown for Cam Pickett. That's one where Levi Wentz ends up blocking 2 guys. Not intentionally, but he's blocking his guy and is so focused on that. And you hear Terrence Samuel throw the word, bouncer out when we're talking to him, KU's wide receivers coach, that is. And, he talks about Levi Wentz, the bouncer, and you get to see a little bit of that, taking out 2 guys, and it opens the way for Pickett. But then the second touchdown, Keaton Kubeka flattens someone in the end zone. And that creates the way for Pickett to be able to get in the end zone. So I think, you hear plenty, and it's such a common thing that's said throughout any wide receiver room, right? We all want to have see each other have success, all that stuff. Everyone always says the right things. But I think when you're willing to go out and be physical and block for one of your other guys to go and score, I think that's when you see some of that real camaraderie come through. And yeah, I thought, I'm interested to see how the different ways KU uses these guys. Because again, I think there was very much at halftime like, all right, well, we're packing up our interesting things, and now it's just going to be pretty vanilla. And so Missouri and even getting into West Virginia and Cincinnati, like those games, I'm very interested to see what these wide receivers look like because it was a positive first showing. Doesn't mean everything's going to be great all year, but who knows? But I think in terms of like a Cam Pickett, you heard about him here in camp as the most well-rounded wide receiver KU has. I think he showed that. You can use him out of the backfield. You can use him out of the slot, a versatile weapon, super important. Emmanuel Henderson, man, he's fast. Like every time he touches the ball, you're looking for a crease to see, okay, can he go find it? Is he going to make 6 guys miss? No. He's also what, 6'3", 6'4"-ish, If he had a wiggle, he'd be in the NFL right now. So,
he would not be at Kansas. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have that type of speed and wiggle and, not produce at Alabama and not go to the NFL. So, but I think just in terms of the profiles that KU has at wide receiver, it was a positive first game. And I liked your point about the tight ends too, Kevin. Just a lot of guys got used, Carson Brune, Bowden Grown, you've got Deshaun Hanukkah. Man, You wish he didn't drop that pass early on, just for confidence and snap playing reasons. But you got 3 guys there that you trust, and that's before you even get to Leighton Cure, who I think who he is. I just think you got to see a lot of the different weapons that KU has. And again, I'm not jumping to any conclusions here, but for a game against an FBS team that is going to be solid, right? They should probably make a bowl game. I think it's a good start to have some of these things kind of show up and have guys that you heard about in camp kind of do it on the field in a real game setting. I think that's positive.
I told my wife, I was like, I'm not saying Kansas is a top 25 team, but I said they did. but I said they did what you would expect or hope a top 25 team would do in a game like this. For a one-off game, the performance that they had was really strong. I also thought it was interesting, Swain, because Jeff Grimes was both the offensive coordinator and the tight ends coach. It felt like the tight end utilization, and not just in the passing game, but also, from hey, we're going to run behind these guys, was a lot more last night. I felt like they really used those guys as sort of the tip of the spear quite a bit more than they did a year ago.
Yeah. Well, you're so right about the tight end usage, man. That is a unit that did not get used last year. And all of a sudden you come out of this game and you've got, multiple guys being used in different ways. I think Matt Lubick coming back is a very important thing for KU. So I think, Kevin, now we offensively, we got to talk about the offensive line.
Sure.
Enrique Cruz starts at right guard or right tackle. Amir Herring starts at left guard. A bit of a penalty fest. TV situation from where I sit in the press box was not great. So I was having to do my best to try and find replays, but it didn't seem like it was the most obvious penalties sometimes. Some of them I think were, some clear holds, but a couple of them I was like, I'm not too sure about that.
Yeah.
But still, not the perfect start for the offensive line, but I think this is a unit that's going to have
one of the Kobe holds was one of the ones that jumped out at me like that. That didn't seem super holdy, but it is what it is.
Yeah. That was the one where he tossed the guy to the ground, right? On the run. Yeah, I didn't agree with that one. But I think there were a couple of them, the other ones, I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, probably should call that. But what do you think about the offensive line? I thought mixed bag overall.
Yes. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. There were some really positive moments. I mean, you brought up the touchdown pass to Keaton Kubeka, and what a great route that was. Jalen Daniels was sitting back there in the pocket for a while because he was initially looking to his left and then had time to work through his progression and come back to Kubeka over the middle. And so there were some good points like that. I thought Calvin did some good things. Bryce Foster had a couple plays where he looked like Bryce Foster, right? But I think the consistency was the big thing there. It wasn't, and it's week 0. I get that, and you expect them to get better from there. But the consistency overall, I don't think was where you would want it to be. You had the penalties. You also had just some missed blocks and things like that in key situations. And there were a couple times, I thought, Swain, where KU was kind of poised to maybe break something and somebody missed a block. And so it didn't wind up being a big play. And so I think you put it well when you said a lot of stuff to clean up, basically.
Yeah, and look, I think out of any unit, maybe on the team, I think offensive line was always going to be the one that is the most work in progress.
Yeah.
You've got a new starter left tackle, who I think is going to be really good. I think Calvin's going to be really good. But you've got a new guy left tackle, but then you've got a left guard competition where a guy that wasn't even on the picture at the start of camp won, and Amir Herring, right? Going into camp, it was James Livingston and Tavake Tuikolavatu. Those are the two guys. And Amir Herring, with this consistency, with his level of play, earned the job.
Yeah.
Total credit to him. But he's got to now build some, chemistry, if you will, with Calvin and next to Bryce. And then you've got right tackle, whereas Nolan Gorska and Enrique Cruz, and that battle took a while, and KU still rotated there as well as left guard during the game. But I just think it's going to take some time for the units to come together. Now, there are some things going KU's way. Jalen Daniels, with his athleticism, is going to get KU out of some jams.
Yep.
There were a couple times where there's some missed blocks in pass pro, and Jalen's able to get him out of it because he's so athletic and he's got such a good feel for where guys are coming from and how to evade them. And then I just think generally Daryl Agpalsa is a very good offensive line coach. Yes. And I think you'll see the unit improve over the course of the season. Now, Missouri is going to be a huge test because their defensive line is legit.
Yeah.
But then after that, let's say K goes into Columbia and ends up being a big growing pains day, and there's improvement, but you can still see where they've got to go. Well, the nice part is you're not going to face another defensive line that's that good for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So, it's just one of those where I think this is a unit that early in the season, we're going to see some growing pains. And then I think by the time we get to kind of October, the hope is going to be that it rounds into form. Will it? I mean, we got to see. But, you can look across the line, Kevin. I mean, there's talent. Clemens was a highly coveted recruit. Amir Herring was a 4-star recruit who signed with Michigan. Bryce Foster is Bryce Foster, one of the best centers in the nation. Kobe Baines is now a 3-year contributor, 2nd-year starter. Yep. Enrique Cruz has played tackle in the Power 4, right, in the ACC for Syracuse and played pretty well. So, KU's it's not a talent issue now. It's just about guys coming together and making sure it becomes a cohesive unit. And that's just going to take time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that works for them is the scheme, right? Because you're going to have a lot of plays where you get the defense looking left when you're going right. And so, you aren't necessarily expecting, hey, you have to blow your guy off the ball every play. It's more just, hey, don't make a mistake. Be where you're supposed to be. And like you said, a lot of that comes down to chemistry, timing, and things like that. And offensive lines typically do get a lot better over the course of the year.
Exactly. So, all right, Kevin, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can talk about defense, and then we can talk a little bit just big picture, maybe some special team stuff as well. So we'll do that right after this. All righty, Kevin, let's get back to this now. Let's go to defense. What was the first thing that stood out to you?
Well, the first thing that stood out to me, Swain, is I think the feeling was, oh my gosh, we're in for a shootout after Kansas's first drive, and then Fresno State comes right back and goes right down the field. And you're so close to a stop on that first drive. I mean, EJ Warner is in, was it Bengali Kamara's hands? And he just kind of shovels the ball off, in a panic deal, and it leads to a huge play. They go down and score. But overall, I thought the team speed was really good. And I think that was something that I thought would stand out. I thought they would be maybe a little raw defensively, but I thought that the athleticism would flash. And I think that it did. The other thing that jumped out, and you and I were actually talking about this just before we came on, DK McDonald showed a lot of looks, especially up front. I mean, you had some odd fronts, some even fronts. You had stuff where the center and guards were all covered, where KU played with like a true nose guard over the center. And you had stuff where you had the defensive ends pretty much lined up out there like a slot corner. They were so far off the ball. And so they showed a lot of different looks, moved guys around a bunch. John Kamara was, back as a more traditional linebacker. Then he was, up almost as a defensive end. The same thing was true for Bengali Kamara. You had Lyric Rawls playing both in the box and, sort of a deeper, more center field safety. And so they moved a lot of guys around, got a lot of guys in too. But yeah, that whole offseason thing about, hey, DK McDonald is going to simplify this thing, at least in week 0, did not appear to come to pass.
Yeah. Shocker, guy with a 3-3-5 background wants to do some, 3D lineman stuff or, 5D line. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I think you're right, Kevin. The team speed aspect of it is really what stood out to me. And it really just showed up on the first play or second play, technically, right? Bangala Kamara is this close to like a 6-yard TFL
Yeah.
on a run play. That wasn't like any sort of delayed run. It was a guy gets ball, guy hands off. Bangala Kamara is there in the backfield. I thought he really flashed. Trey Lathan quietly had a really good game, 8
Yeah.
tackles, I believe it was, leading the team. Uh, you know, KU needed a better linebacker play, and those two guys I thought really showed up. But then, you can go anywhere across the defense, right? Lyric Rawls, really good foot speed. I thought made some physical plays, struggled a little bit in the first maybe 2 drives tackling, but then after that really showed up. I mean, he made an incredibly athletic play with that somersault interception front flip. Like that was the way he was able to handle the ball and hold on to it. That was impressive. And then you can get to the defensive line and, guys you've seen before, right? We talked plenty
Yeah.
last year about Blake Harold. He's a really good athlete. And the way that KU used him was a little bit different, where the widening him out a little bit so he can attack the guard on a specific angle, right? That's going to help him. You can look at, Leroy Harris flashing at times. Dak Brinkley showed up, Alex Bray, Justice Finkley. Like you just kind of saw the DN depth. And that's before you talk about someone like Dean Miller, who was in street clothes.
Yeah.
So I just think you look at the athleticism and look, we're talking about a defensive ends group that doesn't have its arguably, kind of twitchiest defensive end in Dean. So, I just thought you watch the defense run around and it's such a difference. And it makes a huge difference too, Kevin, when the guys who are in the middle of your defense are not your worst athletes.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
that was the case, for how many years where the guys, your linebackers were some of your worst athletes, right? I was thinking back to the, Eric Gilliard and Lorenzo McCaskill
Oh yeah.
as your linebackers. And it's just like, oh my
Love,
God.
love, love Rich Miller to death. Rich Miller is not winning any 100-meter dashes anytime soon. I do not believe.
Yeah. And it makes such a difference, Kevin, when those guys are in the middle of the defense that have to get places to put out fires. It makes such a difference when those guys are mobile. And so I thought that really stood out to me as well. And where do you think this is going to go in terms of, I think, just personnel defensively? Because you're talking about Joseph Sipp hurt right now,
Yep.
like a wrist injury or something like that. He has a cast or a brace on it right now. You're still missing like a Gage Keys at D tackle. Jason Gilliam didn't play. Like personnel wise, this is going to be pretty interesting to track because, John Kamara was the third linebacker.
Yeah.
So I just think there's going to be a lot of fun stuff here to keep an eye on over the next couple weeks.
Well, you look at the way that they widened out Blake Harold, and there were some times that they would have 3 defensive tackles in the game at once. And there were a couple times it looked like they had 3 defensive ends out on the field at once. The sack by Leroy Harris off of the little twist that they ran, the guy on the interior who hit the guy back that allowed him to get in was Justice Finkley playing inside. And so you got to see a lot of different guys, but with the way they widened out Blake Harold, doesn't that seem like a Gage Keys thing? Like something that Gage would be really, really good at with how he can make himself skinny with the athleticism he has. And so I think that's the exciting thing when you look at guys like Gage Keys coming back, when you look at Joseph Sipp coming back with some of the things they did with the linebackers, is they showed a lot yesterday. And I think there's still more stuff that they could do based on guys that weren't even out there. But I also wanted to ask, I mean, we were talking about defensive line and linebackers. KU rolled out 2 second-year corners as starters. What did you think about those guys? And obviously Hurley played a lot too. I mean, they were very young at cornerback last night.
Didn't notice them. And I think that's the best thing you can say about a young cornerback.
Yep.
Didn't notice them.
Yep.
More than a bunch of missed tackles. Not a lot of missed assignments. Just a solid game. And man, I think there was one. What play was it? I was watching the game back this morning. Austin Alexander just threw himself at one of the Fresno State guys and just totally stonewalled them. And again, that's someone that has seen his body develop. And I think Jalen Todd's a great example too. Like those 2 guys showed up to campus light. And Jalen Todd, his journey was very much well documented leading into last year.
Both of them were sub 170 pounds. Like both of
Exactly.
them were in the 160s, I think.
Yeah, and now both of them look really good physically. Like Austin has come in to do multiple interviews this year, calendar year, and he's got muscles.
Yeah.
It's one of those where he looks the part. And then you've got Jaleel Hurley, who is a former top 100 recruit, shows up, and this is a question I got asked on the board where it was, what's the difference between him and like Demarius McGee? I just think physicality wise, Jaleel Hurley's in just a different level than what McGee was. And that allows you to go in and go and play and make plays where, the I guess kind of pass breakup, it also kind of just hit off them, but still being in position, right, to make that play physically, you've got to have good size. And so I liked what I saw from those three. Now it's a question of, can you get DJ Graham back to give you, kind of having a fourth guy there that has experience. And when you get in a Big 12 play, you need, dog days of the season. You need to be able to be consistent with your nutrition. And that's something they've talked about with, Austin Alexander. Can he do that? Because that's going to be the big question for him. It's his first year playing consistent football, at the power forward level. Can you keep your body in a position where you can go and make plays every week? So that's all stuff that we'll have to cover later. But I thought for an opening game, right, Jalen Todd, I thought was very solid. Austin Alexander, solid. And look, EJ Warner doesn't have the arm talent to really, I think, challenge you in some ways. Some of the throws over the middle were just, I think, waiting to get intercepted, or they were very fortunate that plays weren't made on the ball because guys were just so open. But I just thought that they looked the part. And so that's a huge starting point for KU. And the fact that you think that, Jalen Todd is a sophomore and Austin Alexander is a redshirt freshman, those two guys have a lot of football in front of them. And the fact that they are playing in their first games as starters, and we're not talking about, oh, they missed a tackle, or, oh, hey, busted assignment here, busted assignment there, guys got open because of them. I think that's a huge, huge first step for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And 3/4 of playing cornerback, I feel like, is confidence too, right? And so you didn't want them to come out in this situation. And I realized Jalen Todd played a year ago, but at the same time, Jalen was the number 3 corner, right? He wasn't asked to go out and defend a number 1 wide receiver typically, and all of those things. And so this was a game that I feel like could have cost them confidence. If EJ Warner comes out, throws for 350 and the corners can't cover anybody, you're sitting here saying, oh no, like this could be a long season. And so for them to come out and play the way that they did, where, like you said, you're leaving the game and you're not really thinking about them, it was a huge positive.
Exactly. And so, you look at safety, like Devin Dye shows up and makes a play. That's someone who I wanted to see what he could do when healthy, because the talk going into camp last year and even the start of camp was that, he was a guy that they thought could help, but then he was so banged up and tried to play through it. And that it's just, when you're out there, you're going to be evaluated, and sometimes context matters as well. So we'll have to see if he can do it consistently, but I thought he showed up a couple times, Mason Ellis playing the nickel role, moving back to play some strong safety as well. I think we'll have to track the safety depth, because that was a concern that I had, and it's still one that I'm going to hold on to for a little bit. But I think, positive signs from game one, and even seeing a guy like Saeed Gibbs get some run. He was someone that had a great summer going into camp, right? Was in a good competition to win that starting role as the nickel. Then he gets hurt, misses some time. Mason Ellis doesn't miss a beat and takes the starting role. But that's someone that started games for Georgia Tech last year as a slot corner that's coming and is a reserve for KU. So I think secondary wise, you're looking at it and saying there's still going to be a lot to track here, but the depth looks pretty good, especially if you can get DJ Graham back. And if guys like Devin Dye and Mason Ellis can play consistently, all of a sudden you do think, KU can play too deep at those spots. But again, it's all stuff. It's one game. Let's check back in October and see how we're feeling about this. But again, positive signs for an opening game.
I think Taylor Davis too plays like he's a senior. He's somebody that you don't notice because he's playing sort of that deeper, more center field role, but he's so rarely out of position. He's where he's supposed to be, and he puts out a lot of fires because of
Mm.
that before the fire gets started. And so I thought Taylor Davis played well yesterday too.
Yeah, and he also looks like a senior, just like anything he played like it. So there was a moment, I can't remember if we talked about on the podcast, but it was in like January when the guys came back for winter workouts, and they posted a photo of them, and some of them are not wearing shirts, and I just see a guy who looks jacked, has like a tattoo and a beard, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to learn all these guys. I'm like, who is this? Why am I not putting the face to a name here? I typically like pride myself being able to do that. And so I texted someone at KU and I was like, who is this? They're like, Taylor Davis. I was like, oh my gosh. Like he's a, red shirt sophomore, looks
Yeah.
like he's 30, and you're right. Like he plays fast, but he doesn't play like someone who is now in his first year as a starter. And obviously he played a lot last year and so got his feet wet, but he's someone that's going to be relied upon. And I think having two guys on the back end like Lyric, who is experienced, and Taylor, who's getting experience, having those two guys who are athletic, can make plays, like it's just a good spot to be in, especially with kind of just the natural size they have as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that the safety group has a chance to be a strength this year, but I agree with your point though that depth is the concern there. What happens if Taylor Davis has a hammy, or Lyric Rawls, has to go out for a series or two? I think that's where you start to ask a few more questions. But for right now, you have to like what you're seeing from those guys.
Yep, exactly. 100%. All right, Kevin, well, let's do some special teams here.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to do so? All right, we can go punt first or we can go kicking first. What do you want
You
to
got to
do?
go punt because of how fired up Finn Lappin was to he that was a Finn Lappin showcase last night.
That, I mean, 3 punts, averaging 53.5 yards, long of 61. A second one, I need to go back and look actually real quick, but yeah, like it is funny because he puts up numbers at McNeese State, right? And what he did yesterday is what he did at McNeese State, but still, like even though he's done it in college, you're like, well, you kind of want to see him do it in person at Kansas. And that second punt that he had was it was a bomb. And obviously, it hits and it kicks forward towards the corner, but still, just the leg that he has, like that's going to be something that's going to help KU, because there are going to be games where it's going to be tough and you're going to need to win the field position battle. Having someone like Finn on your side where you're not worried about him, shanking out of bounds 30 yards, or, just totally not even having the leg to get it 55, that's a huge positive. And I thought for KU, that's going to be, he'll be very helpful for KU, I think, this year.
What was your feeling? Like, I know that various kickers at KU have been in situations where you felt almost anxiety when they go out to kick. What was your feeling when Laith Marjan goes out there to kick a 47-yarder?
I mean, I had confidence.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was 47 yards until I looked down at like the score box thing. Because he had plenty of leg left.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Like, and I know we talked about it before that, he said he can go well north of 50.
Yeah, he said he hit 57 at practice, and he joked, he's like, I don't know if Lance will let me try 58 though.
Yeah, I meant to ask him, and I'll probably do it at some point. Was that off a tee or was that off a hold?
I don't
Because
know.
I saw him pregame warmups doing tee stuff, and like he was going to 60, and I was like, yeah, okay, this makes sense. But off a hold, obviously, is different. But yeah, I had confidence, Kevin. I really did. I assume you had confidence.
Yeah, for sure. I think, but at the same time, there's a little bit of it, and I don't want to rip on the guy, but like, but like because of Seth Keller and like the fact that
Mhm.
he was a good kicker coming in, and you wound up obviously he got, I don't want to say yips, but he got to a point where he was a little bit more inconsistent than you would have expected. I think there's always, even if a guy's been good at kicker, there's always a little bit of, well, we'll wait and see to it. And so, always good to have that opener though, where you have a guy go out there in that situation and have a chance to not just make like a 31 yarder or something like that, but actually have to make a difficult kick.
Oh, exactly. Well, and so when the kick went in and it was 47, I was like, all right, I got to go look and see, last year. And so Tabor Allen did make a 47-yarder against Iowa State. But
Yep.
outside of that, he didn't. That was the longest that he did last year. So I think we're going to see a 50-yard attempt, maybe more. Now, granted, I don't think Leipold is against going for it on fourth down and being aggressive. So,
Yep.
but I think also knowing who your kicker is, and I think the trust that a coach has in the kicker can change the math on that too, or at least the mental math. The physical math is going to be the same whether to go or not, but the confidence the Leipold has in Lath, that could change some things. So I thought, Kevin, in terms of your actual specialists, right? Your
Yep.
kicker, your punter, like good start. I think punting, much more easily translatable, a little less mental, much
Yeah.
more just execution. Can you get your foot on the ball in the right spot and not have it go, duck hook left? Whereas field goal kicking, so much of that is confidence. And we'll have to see how Lath Marjan responds if/when he misses a field goal. Because statistically, not likely considering what he showed last year at South Alabama, but he still did miss a kick last year at South Alabama. So we'll have to see. Also, real quick, Tate Nagy punt return thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is they've said is secure the change in possession, right? And we got to see them mess around with I know it's not called like a jugs machine anymore, but the machine that launches the footballs
Mm-hmm.
like up in the air to the players. We got to see them do that with the receivers, and he was maybe the most natural guy of that group in terms of tracking the ball in the air. And you could see a little bit of that yesterday. He actually had a fairly difficult catch when Jaleel Hurley almost ran into him and kind of bailed out at the last second. And so he caught the ball pretty well. Obviously, the return that he attempted didn't really come off, but at the same time, I think that he did the important thing, which is catching the ball, getting it to your offense. I also wanted to ask you. I know Leipold said Emmanuel Henderson maybe should have stayed in the end zone on that kickoff. I was very excited to see Emmanuel Henderson take that opening kickoff out and give it a chance for a big play. I'm not going to lie.
I think Emmanuel Henderson was excited for Emmanuel Henderson to try and go make a play. Like, how can you
It
blame
did
him?
not work out, but
Yeah, that's okay. Can I give you a quick kickoff stat here?
yeah, let's
Because
go.
I was looking last year at the numbers. All right, so KU, it's crazy. Basically, KU's average field position was 23 yards when they returned a kick. Their average length of return was about 19 yards. So just one of those, keep in the back of your head. All of last year, right? That's you factor in, what is that? 23 returns, my numbers show here, and then 32 times they fair caught it or it was a touchback. So 23 times they returned it, average of 19 yards to the 22-yard line. So 3 yards of difference if you just fair catch it. Obviously, a little more risk when you don't. It could go a
Yeah.
little bit over, could go a little under, but that's just something to keep in mind. And I think everyone wants to see Emmanuel Henderson try and return one.
Yes. Yeah.
But again, it's just looking at the numbers. Is it the best thing to do? No, but man, for the vibes, it really is. I think it's a more fun thing.
Opening kickoff of the year and everything too. It's kind
Yeah,
of
you
like,
can't fair catch that. You
yeah,
can't fair catch
yeah. Don't fair catch that. Run
that.
that out. Run that out.
Well, also, I did love that. Like, he caught it on the back foot.
Yeah.
It wasn't he's running forward into it like you can see
Yeah.
happen. It was a catch back and then go, which that was just like, okay, yeah, he just really wanted to go make a
Yeah,
play,
he really wanted to run that thing back.
which I respect, man. I respect. So, any other final thoughts, Kevin, on the game itself? We can talk a little about next week and how it all looks, but
No,
what any final
I thought it
thoughts?
was a perfect showcase for this new era of college football at the University of Kansas. When you look at the way the team played, when you looked at the opening of the booth, it came out, about perfectly. And you and I have talked before, there's nothing that coaches love more than winning, but also winning when you aren't perfect, where they have teaching tape that they can come back in and say, if you would have played Missouri yesterday, you would have lost by 20. And here are all the mistakes that you made, et cetera. And so Coaches love to be able to have that W up there, but also be able to go to your players and say, "Well, you guys actually screwed this, and this up."
Yeah. Next week. Again, this is why I like doing. It's not good. Like theoretically, you want to open up with you can get your kinks out with like an FCS team. I also don't hate that we got to see some of this.
Yeah.
Versus an FBS team, and then you go and watch KU against Wagner next week, where you've already got a taste. You've seen what it looks like when you need to have it, and I think next week being able to see some of the different things that maybe come up and what's changed, and then also who plays in the second half of that game, right? Isaiah Marshall got in, showed some juice on his quarterback run, got close to the end zone on his.
And then took a knee that was very important to some. Apparently, KU's number was 31.5.
Oh, their team total?
Yeah, their team total was 31.5. And so he gets to the one, and then it's like, all right, we're gonna take a couple knees, because somebody tweeted about that, and Isaiah Marshall actually tweeted out rock chalk or something to it. It was kind of funny.
Wait, someone they tweeted at Isaiah about?
No, I think they tweeted Isaiah Marshall breaks this run. KU's team total is 31.5, and they wind up kneeling to take out and he respond rock chalk. But it was just funny because it was apparently a very important kneel down for some.
That's wild. Okay, I thought you meant a fan tweeted at Isaiah about it. I was about to say that's messed up. Okay,
there's not
okay, that's funny.
Isaiah could have done about he's going to take a knee, but screw it, I'm going to go in and get into the end zone. That's not the way to get more playing time.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that makes sense. Do you want to talk a little bit about Iowa State, K-State, or do you care?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was an interesting first game. It was week 0, right? It was sloppy. Neither team is what they're going to be. You can't draw any long-term conclusions, I don't think, about either team from what happened. But ultimately, because they played each other in week 0, it's one of those that if Iowa State's in the Big 12 title game at the end of the year and K-State's a game off, you can ultimately point to a week 0 game as maybe the reason why.
Yeah. There's so much give and take with these, with this international stuff, and it's only going to continue. You're seeing the NFL do all this stuff. I'm telling you, college football is doing the same thing. There's gonna be other European games coming. They've gotten a taste.
Teams usually lay an egg after coming back from those trips too. If you look at the way that teams play the week after their international game, it's usually pretty rough.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Obviously we went to Europe for our honeymoon, and coming back, it wasn't 5 days probably later, I felt like normal again.
Yep.
Imagine having to go practice football. They fly back, and I think Iowa State plays someone this weekend.
Yep.
And it's oh my gosh, that's also the crazy part. Is I think with the NFL, at least they get them a bye week after. Or college isn't. So yeah, the international stuff's crazy for college games, but that's certainly going to continue. As for the game itself, it was rainy and it was a grass field. That wasn't great. You're right. It was very much week 0. Bunch of college kids are jet lagged.
Yeah.
Out of the wazoo. It's just a not a good game to watch. And
watching it in congrats to Iowa State on the win, but watching it. But watching it, it was very much this isn't really K-State. This isn't really Iowa State. It's all just about who can survive at this point.
Exactly. And you're right. Thinking about it like that, where if you go and fast forward to December and Iowa State's in the Big 12 title game, and let's say K-State's a game off, and you're looking back at the Ireland game in week 0 is the reason that you do or don't make the Big 12 title game. I mean, it's just wild.
Yeah.
So, hey, it is what it is, right? College athletics is becoming professionalized, as we know, and so it's all about making money.
Also, Iowa State 5 of 6 over K-State now, and
really,
yeah, they've won 5 of their last 6 over K-State now. The funny thing is, obviously K-State has a streak over KU, and then KU 3-0 over Iowa State in their last 3. So yeah,
it's a big circle.
Yeah. So, 5 of 6. And K-State's one win, I want to say, was by like a point, like 10-9 or something like that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
will be interested.
I had K-State's number for whatever reason.
That's so interesting. I will be interested to see, Kevin, now that I think about it, with all the games or lack of games yesterday, what the ratings are for KU Fresno State. Obviously, with it being the score it was, especially at halftime, there's not going to be a big fourth quarter pop because it's a close game, and a G5 team's going to upset a P4 team. But I'd be interested to see what it was. 6 o'clock Central. Kind of mid first quarter when it's like, oh, KU went down and scored. Oh, Fresno State scored. Oh, is this going to be a shootout? That type of moment in the game. Just what the ratings are.
And then I want to say about halfway through the game, at some point during the game, Stanford Hawaii started up, and that one apparently was crazy. I mean, people were tweeting about that at one point. Like Stanford's defensive tackle made a play to stop Hawaii, except he did a TikTok dance and got flagged for it, and so Hawaii went down and scored. Like college football is so back, Swain. It is so back. Like once we get off here, look up Stanford TikTok dance or whatever.
TikTok dance.
Yeah, a defensive tackle did a TikTok dance, like a sack or like a tackle for loss, and got flagged for it. And Hawaii went down and scored. I think did Hawaii win that game?
Andrew Luck was probably raging on the sideline.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Hawaii did win. Wow. That's crazy. All right. That's enough yapping. We can continue this ourselves, Kevin.
If you guys are watching this, go watch the Stanford TikTok thing because it's surreal.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This sport, man. I'm so happy it's back. Well, hey, thanks as always for watching the Fog.net podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop a comment. If you're listening on the podcast platform of your choice, please leave a rating and review. It goes a long way in helping us reach a lot more Kansas fans so they can hear Kevin and I yap about nothing at the end of a podcast.
Yeah.
And always, make sure you go check out Kevin's stuff. KC Sports Network, Pay Heat Podcast, Verbal Commitment Podcast. They're doing great stuff over there, talking plenty of Kansas and plenty of high school recruiting in the state of Kansas and KC Mo technically too. So look, plenty of content out there for you. Make sure you're checking out Fog.net for all your KU football, basketball, recruiting, all that stuff, all the coverage. We got it. You need it, we got it. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to y'all next week.